Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Welcome to today's video. Today's video is going to be a foundation review. It is going to be on the Makeup Forever HD Skin Matte Velvet Powder Foundation. Now, I'm really excited to be going over this foundation here. It is made in France, so it was released in France a little bit early than in the US. It should be launching in the US tomorrow. So in today's video, I'll be going over details of this foundation, inserting in some swatches. I'll also just be going over a wear test that I did on the first time that I tried this foundation, and then just going over my final thoughts, what I think of this foundation, who I think it's best for. So if that sounds good to you, make sure you give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't yet. But with all that out of the way, let's get started talking about the details of this foundation. All right. So this does retail for 40 euros. Since it hasn't released in the US yet, I don't know the price. I'm going to assume it's anywhere between 40 to 42 US dollars. It comes in 38 shades, and this is what the component looks like. So the cover of every component is different depending on what the shade is on the inside. I kind of think that's a cute little touch. It's very aesthetically pleasing when you have the whole shade range lined up. I personally picked up the shade 1R12, and I think it's actually a pretty good shade match for me. I am wearing this foundation today. Everything that I'm wearing is listed in the description box down below. As always, this isn't a new product to Makeup Forever, however, this is actually a reformulated product. Now, I remember when the Velvet Powder Foundation came out a few years ago now, 4 or 5 years ago, and a lot of people really loved that foundation. I remember that because I wanted to pick it up based on the reviews. I just never got around to it. Powder foundation intimidates me just a little bit, if I'm being honest. I never want my makeup to look very cakey or powdery. Even on the day-to-day, I don't wear a lot of powder to set my makeup, so powder foundation is a little bit scary, but because this was so well loved back then, I really wanted to try this new reformulated version. So from what I'm seeing, they reformulated this to be a new clean version. I don't know what that means about the shelf life. That's what concerns me the most. I'm hoping this isn't like a Kosas situation where it goes bad after 3 or 4 months because it has clean ingredients. Only time will tell. But that is what they did, and they're revamping the packaging, etc. This is a vegan formula. I believe it's always been vegan. And here are just some of the bullet point claims really quickly. So it is supposed to be buildable, mattifying, blurring, suitable for all skin types. So just for reference, I do have normal, leaning dry skin, but it is good for every kind of skin type. And then it is waterproof, sweatproof. Now, when I look at the Makeup Forever website, what they really just talk about is how it blurs imperfections, reduces redness, refines pores, smooths texture. But the thing that they really just hone in on, everything that's talked about, is on how buildable the formula is. So they really go over how versatile this powder is. They say that you can either use a brush like this one to have a sheer coverage, and then a sponge is included. So you can either use this fuzzy side here, which is kind of like the Juno & Co sponge. There are a lot of sponges that kind of have this like fuzzy texture, and that's gonna give you a medium coverage. Or you can use this side of the sponge, which is kind of like your typical makeup sponge, I would say, and that's gonna give you full coverage. Now, like I mentioned, this isn't a first impressions video. I've actually been trying this foundation quite a few times now, 4 or 5 times, even though I'm backed up on foundation reviews. They are my favorite videos to film, but I have, for example, the KVD foundation that just released. That video should be coming up next week once I've tested it out more, but I'm really trying to just get better thoughts on a foundation rather than just doing a first impressions on it. So you'll have to let me know down below in the comments if you like that style more, or if you just like the first impressions quick video more. I do also do follow-up videos on all the foundations and rank them. So there's also that, but I always welcome the feedback. Before I get started talking about the wear test that I tried with this foundation, I'm first going to be inserting in some swatches. You'll be seeing swatches with and without flash. So I'm going to pan over to that, and then we'll be talking about my first impressions wear test on this foundation. Now that you've seen some swatches, I want to go over the very first time that I tried this foundation and just my initial thoughts. It's kind of just a jumping off point for me. So I'll be inserting in some video just off to the side here. First, I want to go over my application. Now, I figured the first time I try this, I should try it with more of the medium coverage. So I did try it with the more fuzzy side of the sponge here. And initially, right off the bat, I messed up because I forgot, since it's a powder, I should put my creams on underneath it, and I didn't even put on concealer. I'm just so used to putting on foundation, then concealer. So I completely forgot concealer, and I figured while I'm here, let's just see how the cream concealer goes on top of the powder foundation. And I'm happy to report it worked out perfectly. I was a little nervous. I was going to have to redo my wear test, but it worked out just great. Now, before I even applied the powder foundation, I did make sure to let my skincare really sink in for at least 30 minutes because I was nervous that the powder would just really cling to any kind of moisture on my skin if I didn't really let it sink in, but everything worked out great. I was really surprised by the coverage of the foundation, and I was really surprised at how natural it looked. It did really blur my pores. I thought my skin looked really great after application, and overall, I really liked my makeup that day. Then going on to my 4-hour check-in, which I do outside in natural daylight, just so you can get an idea of what it looks like in the sun. I was a little bit shiny, and again, that just really surprised me because this is a powder, and I just associate powder with cakiness, looking very heavy on the skin. But I was starting to have my natural oils come through, and all it was doing was making my foundation look even more natural. At that point, you wouldn't even know that I was wearing a powder foundation. I really think it looked like I was wearing just an average liquid foundation on my skin. I thought it looked really great. And then by the 8-hour check-in, no touching up, no nothing. The natural oils were really starting to come through. It was very shiny. It wasn't anything I was uncomfortable with where I thought it was just way too much and I looked just oily, splotchy. It looked shiny, but it just looked like I'd been wearing a foundation all day. So I wasn't upset about that. Again, I was just really surprised by how natural the foundation looked after 8 hours. You really couldn't tell a difference between my skin and the foundation, and that is the test of a perfect wear time for me. I want my foundation to just wear down naturally. I don't want it to slip off. I don't want it to be splotchy, and that's exactly what it gave me. The only thing I would mention is that my complexion products completely faded away, which is not a big deal, but sometimes there are foundations that just cling to those complexion products a little bit more than others. But I think because it was a powder, the powder products on top didn't really stick, and those had faded away by the end of the night. After my initial wear test, that was really just my jumping off point. I wanted to then take it a step further, try it with different primers, try it with the brush, try it with the full coverage side. So I've really tested that all out and come up with just the best way that I like to wear this foundation. So now let's just go into my final thoughts. The best way that I personally like to apply this foundation is with the powder brush. So that is going to give you a more sheer coverage. However, that is how I'm wearing this foundation today. And what I did before is I spot concealed with just, under my eyes, any red spots, like specifically around my nose here. And then I went in with the powder brush, and I still think that it gave pretty decent coverage. I don't think it's like a skin tint coverage or a light coverage. Like it's a light medium coverage. Now the sponge side is going to give you a very full coverage. The initial way that I did it is more of like a medium full. So I would say that it's correct in that it is very buildable and you can change up the way and the coverage that it gives you. And I would also agree with the claim that it is very blurring. That was my favorite thing about this foundation. I really enjoyed this foundation. We'll just get that out of the way. I am highly impressed by how this performed, mostly just on how natural it felt. And it wasn't as matte as I was expecting. Like, yes, it's matte. I've been wearing this foundation maybe 2 hours now, and I don't think my skin looks overly matte. Like, I was thinking it was going to be L'Oreal Infallible Matte Wear matte, and that is not the case. I would say that this is a very natural leaning matte foundation, and I am really enjoying it. I don't know if matte is like the new thing. I'm kind of just appreciating matte foundations a little bit more and then just using highlight to make it glowy where I want. But I'm kind of over just like the overly sweaty, glowy foundation. I'm just over that. I'm loving how my foundation looks now, and I'm loving the versatility of this powder. The person that I think that this powder would be best for is someone who, you know, if you have it just every day, get ready at the vanity, like that's great. But I think it's going to be best suited for people who get ready on the go, which is not me. But this is a great, just versatile foundation where, you know, it's a powder, it's not going to crack, as well as just being a really great touch-up powder. So you kind of have a 2-in-1. If you have a small makeup bag, you get ready in your car right before work, something like that, you don't have to have a liquid foundation as well as a touch-up powder. You could just use this as both and build the coverage based on what you're feeling that day. So that is what I love about this the most. I think in the future, this will be a powder that I use mostly probably as a touch-up powder while giving me coverage, because it does really mattify and soak up the oils while not looking cakey and powdery. I can't emphasize this enough because that's what I was most scared about, is that it was gonna look cakey and powdery, and it did a 180, the complete opposite of that. It looks so natural on the skin. I've had like a love-hate relationship with Makeup Forever. I tried their very popular HD Skin Foundation when I was, you know, I think I must have been 18, 20, I'm 33 now. And that was my first introduction to the brand, and I hated that foundation. It looked so terrible on me. And then a couple months ago, I tried this powder here. This is the Twist and Light powder in medium. I have a dedicated video to this, which I'll link above, but this powder really also impressed me. And since then, I've kind of like now been peeking at like Makeup Forever products. I think that they, if I had to guess, I think that they're starting to market their products and make products more, not just for makeup artists like they used to do. They used to be a theater brand, if I'm not mistaken, so very just heavy makeup. When you have makeup that's on stage, like you need it to show from far away if you're in the crowd. So I know that that's how they started. Now it seems like they're starting to make their products more for consumers, the everyday consumer like myself, and I think they're going in a great direction. I hope that they don't leave the theater world behind, but for me personally, being selfish, whatever direction they're going in, I am loving it. So that's kind of my thoughts on this foundation here. Other than just being able to really build the foundation to the coverage that you want, other than it being pore blurring, it works well with everything. It does say on their website, just looking over their website, it does really touch on the fact that you can put this on over skincare and it won't crease. So I wanted to mention that because that was also just a concern of mine. You don't have to wait 30 minutes after putting on your skincare to put this foundation on. It will go great over creams right afterwards. It just doesn't act like your typical powder foundation. I tried it with a hydrating primer. I tried it with a pore blurring primer. You really don't need a pore blurring primer because it blurs your pores regardless, but I do just want to mention that with more of a silicone primer, it worked great over that. I'm very impressed by this powder foundation. If you're in the market for a new foundation, I would give this one a shot. If you're looking for something just new, different, and go in a different direction, I think it's very versatile. That's like my favorite kind of product. I don't know why I keep hammering on this and saying the same word over and over, but it's because I just love versatile products. I don't want to have 5 different things that can only do one thing for each of them. One product that can blur your pores, that can provide you coverage if you want, that can touch up your makeup if you want. Like that's what I want, and that's what I love about this. Now, the only con I can see to this foundation is maybe if you have like severely dry skin, it will look powdery, at least for the first half of the day. It really takes about an hour before kind of like it meshes and melds into your skin. So that's the only thing I'm a little bit iffy on. If you've tried this foundation and you have very dry skin, let us know down in the comments how it works. I just can't speak on it because my skin isn't that dry where I get like dry patches, but I could see, because it's a powder, that it does just kind of emphasize that. I could also see if you have severely oily skin that it's just going to be too oily. You'll have to really build and build and build this powder or have it just be full coverage off the bat, because at the end of the day, like I mentioned, I was a little bit shiny, like in my forehead, on my chin, just in my T-zone. So if you're just way on the spectrum end of oily, it could just be too much for you, but I'm assuming that you have to be very particular about your foundations regardless. If you're more in that medium range, you know, 1 to 5 is kind of how I think to this. 1 being like very dry, 5 being very oily. If you're like 2 to 4, this is going to be a perfect foundation for you. At least that is just my prediction. I can't really say that for sure. That's really the only con that I have, but it's more of a speculation than a con. But I'm going to keep this video kind of short, sweet. I hope that these swatches were helpful. This video was informative, and I will see you all in my next one. Bye, everyone.